Graham Furnis is fully immersed and passionate in providing ITSM solution. He is a business-driven IT professional with 20-plus years of technology and management experience. Graham's certified as an ITIL manager and expert, as well as an accredited ITIL instructor. So with that, I will bring to you Graham Furnis.
Great. Well, thank you, Rick, and welcome everyone, and welcome to May. Summer has begun. So for us Northern Canadians, enjoy it while you can, because 6 months will be over in the end of September, October. Anyway, on to our presentation today. Today back to problem management a bit, and today's presentation is just one which has come up in the past month or two. So I thought I'd do a little presentation on going back to the problem management process, and that it's more than just the process itself, and how do we make a case for problem management. So I thought this would kind of tweak people's interest and spark some debate. I'll just give you some maybe contrary views to what you've seen in the past about how we can come up and justify having problem management in an organization that may be having a challenge making a case for it. So let's start off. Again, I think hopefully there'll be more discussion around these slides than not. But let's get into the first piece here. I've just got to find my right slide number. There it is. So common complaints that we've seen come up, or I've had in the past. There's so many different ones. These are just some of them. But we have no time. There's too many incidents, requests, and changes to manage, so we haven't got time to go back and I'm going to bring up my my marker here. So we haven't got enough time to go back and manage these problems. Maybe we have problem management, but we're not getting better at solving any issues. We might have problem management, but nothing has changed, and upper management may be questioning what we're doing. And the big thing, which I find so often, from my management and whenever I do ITSM work, there's always a question about what's the payback, how is this going to pay off? We understand the concepts, but again, people are typically focused up here, and you're wondering, why should I put more time and effort and cost into building up a problem management process? So today we'll look at different approaches that might answer that question, and that you can still move towards a problem management capability within your organization, but there's perhaps some different ways we can start off. Okay, so ultimately we want to make sure everything is business justified. That's a common ITSM and ITIL approach. So let's jump down to the basics here. Whoops. I'm not sure what's happened here. Okay, so just starting off, again, to get everyone on the same page, I like to do this in these presentations. Primary goal and objectives. Primary goal of problem management: identify and then eliminate any recurring incidents. Minimize the impact of incidents that do occur that we weren't able to prevent or affect with bullet point number 1 there. And on a more proactive basis, prevent problems from happening in the first place. So you'll notice here, and this comes from the ITIL books. If you've been reading those or you're versed in problem management, you know that the word incident pops up everywhere because the definition of a problem is that it's an incident with an unknown cause. And I'll get into more of this later, but this tends to lead people to perhaps narrowing their scope of vision about how you can get going with problem management and where it could tie into. So then the next piece down here in my slide, we talk about scope of IT service management in general. Well, I've got a bunch of things popping up on my machine here. Okay, scope of service management. So typically, and where most companies are looking for justification in problem management is around technology issues. But if I bring up the next parts of this slide here, there's a couple of more areas within the service management scope where we can apply problem management and problem-solving concepts. So at the IT service level, We can also apply problem management in that area. So it's not just the technology. It's also the services that are being delivered ultimately back to the customers, and over here, service agreements that we're trying to meet. And if we have problems, we're not meeting those agreements, and they need to be investigated. And then processes. So we may have deficiencies or challenges within our processes, and that may also fall within a scope of problem management. So the first thing in this presentation, just to kind of open up some thoughts, is that problem management is not just about technology alone. In the full-blown scope and potential in the ITIL framework, we can also apply it to ultimate service delivery and service level management, and other process areas that might be producing these problems. Okay, so I think everyone's got a good base on what is problem management, and the fact that we can apply it to a scope of more than just simply hardware and software. So if we're trying to justify and build up a case for problem management, there's a number, there's so many different approaches. This next slide brings up one of, what's one of the ways we can choose a start point. So one of the things which I've done a lot of work within, pain point analysis. It's one of the workshops actually we're building up. But one of the good places to start is go where the pain is. A common approach. It's all about pain value analysis. People understand pains. They want to get rid of those pains. And if you need to investigate what the cause of a pain is, well, whenever you use the words investigate and cause, there's a good justification for saying, well, let's have some element of problem management to go in and start to investigate the cause of different pains we have throughout the organization. And again, they can be in one of these three different areas. It could be technology, services, and or processes. So you might just choose sort of on a project basis to implement problem management based upon this kind of pain value analysis of trying to find a key technology component that we're having real challenges with, or a service that we're really having challenges with, or a process, and then you can build it up that way. Now, most often, when most organizations start their problem management startups, they typically choose more of a process approach. And if I bring up the next pieces here, and typically they're linking it down here. So because in the definition of a problem, we always talk about incidents, we always say, okay, well, problem management, we're going to position it in conjunction with incident management to try and figure out, what's repeating and what's causing a lot of challenges at the incident level. But you notice here I put a few more processes in place too, which we'll talk about. You can also make a case for starting off problem management, the release, the change, and the service level areas, because if you think broad scope, then problem management can affect those areas as well.
And Graham, just a question here. So again, I think most people would also suggest that typically we link problem management and connect it with incident management. So can you talk a little bit about expand a little bit about how you're talking about those other process areas now?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I'm kind of going a bit beyond the books here. It's a way of kind of providing people with a bit of, we are called thought rocks, so I'm providing you with thoughts to think beyond just the borders of what the ITIL books talk about. The ITIL books hint at these other areas. Releases, we'll get into this one more, but they're the ones doing the build and test and implementation or deployment. They're putting the bugs into our infrastructure. So there is a connection there, because later on they'll show up as incidents, and then problem management has to investigate them. And of course, changes relate to that. And down the road, service level management is connected, because as we'll see when we get into that part, when you have complaints about a service, well, again, something's happened. We can look at our incident records to find out the story behind it. And ultimately, we need to investigate it. Again, that leads back to problem management. So what I'm trying to do with this presentation, and where I'm going next, is actually to run through these other process areas about other approaches to justify or build a case for problem management. I'm just trying to give people an option here to think beyond just the linear and sort of standard thought about problem has to be connected to incident management. There's other ways you might be able to justify and get a problem initiative started without just building a case for how you can make incident management more efficient. So the next couple of slides will elaborate on that point and that question. So let's get into our first one. So in terms of another type of approach, this is the more common approach, and this is why I'm starting here. As we say, we always talk about incident and problem management being connected because problem management is investigating one or more incidents and trying to determine when are these things repeating themselves and how do we handle it. So my first bullet point, and again, I'm coming from the perspective that we don't have problem management. We're trying to build up a case for problem management. What we can try and do in starting off our problem management process, we can formalize what it's already being done in incident management. If a company doesn't have problem management, they're still doing it because you have people who notice that there are recurring patterns and recurring type of symptoms for incidents. And they're saying, this thing shows up over and over again. So we should come up with common workarounds, and those common workarounds should be shared with the rest of the incident management team. So when I talk about this common type of approach within incident management, it's a way of starting up an incident management process which is primarily involved not so much in the research and investigation to solve technical issues, but more trending techniques. In this particular approach, I would say formalize what you're doing in terms of trending all of your incident tickets, and trying to come up with common workarounds and common symptoms and things that identify these types of issues are coming up over and over again on similar types of components or services. Figure out some way of sharing that information, which is the initial concept of the known errors database. And instead of getting good at fixing, you're going to get good at trending and trying to identify that there are commonalities of things going on.
And then, Graham, are you suggesting that with the trending, one of the things is, again, aside from fixing, is there should be more emphasis on removing these problems?
Yeah, that would be, if you're trying to build a case for problem management, that would be a case number 2. Right? Case number 1 is just, let's try and justify having something to begin with, and we can start producing some metrics. If we have a separate process and we can produce our own little tickets around it, we can say, look at all these recurring incidents. You can go to management with that and say, wouldn't it be good if we could remove these because here's the cost it's having on the organization. And that's a typical thing that people do when they take the incident management approach. So then the second business case would be, why don't we now have a problem management process that expands its scope of what it's doing to actually go and investigate the cause of these recurring incidents and symptoms and try and get rid of them. And that has a payback, which, when you're trying to get funding, has a big benefit. So here, ultimately what will happen is that you can justify the initial case for problem management because you have shortened incident resolution times, and it can lead to fewer incidents once we're able to take that second case and build up our investigation to get rid of those bugs. So this is one approach. It's the most common approach, and that's why I'm sort of starting here. And then we get to our next approach, event monitoring and the proactive approach. So this one's, again, you may find that you can't get that second business case for having a larger scope problem management process and to do the investigation and formally start assigning projects across the organization. So here's one where you might want to say, well, okay, another piece of the scope of the problem management process is its proactive element. And proactively, it's monitoring, again, all of the incidents that are going on to try and find trends, but it should also be proactively monitoring the events, which show up as lower priority incidents, to figure out what's going on, and then we should try and investigate those things where event alarms and monitors are going off. So this might be the first step we can take into trying to transform problem management from just a simple trending and workarounds type of issue into more of a problem investigation and solving issue. So we're doing something very similar as before. We're still doing a lot of trending techniques, and we're using those trending skills. But what we're trying to look for here is that with events, when they go off, again, in a perfect ideal world, they would be recorded as low priority, low impact type of incident tickets. But again, when things start to break and they may not have affected the user yet, we want to know the trends of those underlying alarms, because it says a lot about what's going to go off later on. And here's the big thing right here. All these little event monitoring reports and alerts that are going on, they're small tremors before a big earthquake. Something before a significant and major earthquake or major incident should occur. So you can make a case for saying, we should have problem management to take a look at the organizational events that are going on with these different components. We're going to tie ourselves into the event management process, or the event monitoring process, and then we're going to be the trending component for that process to say, well, here's some components that we're concerned about, and we want to proactively look at those before they have a big or major type of incident. So in this case, our two justifications at the bottom here, we can justify our problem management approach by lowering business affecting incidents. So again, we might have a lot of alarms going off which are non-business affecting, and if we can act early to investigate or correct those, we'll reduce the number of actual incidents affecting end users. So it's important to have that metric in incident management, is to have user impacting incidents and non-user impacting incidents. And then
Graham, I had a question here from Steve I think that's relevant before you move on past the trending pieces. Steve asks, with regards to trending, how would you approach if the existing data is nil to non-existent?
Yeah, in that case, you've got only one approach. Pick up the phone and start being a process that talks with the different teams. People are out there monitoring. You may not have tools to do it. You may not have reports to do it. You may have people just observing a bank of servers or something. So problem management needs to become it's kind of social media. They need to go out, and you don't have the reports to do it. You need to talk to the different teams and start putting together the clues that people are telling you, right? So you're going to have to, create your own quasi-metrics based upon conversations with people on devices that they're monitoring. Again, off the top of my head, that's the first thing I would think about, because it takes quite a while to put tools and reporting in place. And if you want to try and get your problem management practices moving without being held up by these tools, well, then that's one way of doing it. So hopefully that gives Steve a bit of an option, something to consider. Okay, so another approach, which you're typically going to be doing, I'll jump down to my next slide, in the major incident improvement approach. Notice that all these things up here I'm calling improvement approaches. Right? So the best way to build a case, rather than full-blown, let's implement problem management top to bottom, let's talk about how we can link to other areas and try and make improvements. Right? So we're making improvements on event management by trending. We're making improvements on incidents by also doing some trending. And here we have, around major incidents, we can also come up with an improvement approach in which major incidents will happen. And there's a basic ITIL rule over here. There you go, a little star. All major incidents should be investigated for root cause to ensure they don't happen again. So this is also justified typically by, if I can write it in here fairly quick, the concept of pain value analysis. Major incidents are major because they cause the business a lot of pain. So quite often it's not a hard sell to get this approach and say, when we have major or significant incidents, let's have a defined problem process to try and get to the cause about what caused that that incident or that major incident, and let's fix it. And usually it's not too hard of a sell when you take this approach, because down here you're providing the business for assurances of non-repeat major incidents, or at least that we've improved the organization if it should happen again. So again, you might use one or a combination of these things to build up a case and say, we really should have some type of formal problem management. And this one's linked to major incidents. So then I have two, they're kind of related. I put release and change really in the same slide. I'll start off with releases. Releases, you're doing build, test, and implement here, and you're putting bugs into the system all the time. Not intentionally, but IT is a complicated thing, and developments are complicated projects. So our problems are more than likely being put into the infrastructure rather than they show up because of a breakdown. So in this kind of approach, you can say, well, how can we tie problem management to releases? Around the concept here of testing and quality assurance, they're the ones who are doing all of the pre-checks and the tests to make sure that when something is rolled out and deployed, we're putting good quality hardware, software, and even potentially processes out there and procedures. So if something does put a bug into the system, then it must be something we missed in our testing and our QA practices. And typically what will happen is that once we figure out there's a bug out there, it shows up as an incident, and it comes back to the development teams, it comes back to release to say, well, get rid of that bug. So in this case, if you sort of tie problem management into the QA and the testing, what we're looking for is that incident management needs to send something back to us saying, hey, there's a bug that was put out into the system, figure out what it is and how it got through testing. So here's where we're actually making use of our problem-solving skills, because in the release process, it's all really technical here. We think about what's really technically going wrong. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the overall release and the testing and QA practices. So here's another way of thinking. You haven't just got to link problem management to incident. If you're looking around trying to say, well, where can we peg? Maybe there's a lot of pains happening out of our release practices, or maybe we don't have release practices, but maybe we have testing and QA. So maybe you can try and shoehorn problem management onto that end of the spectrum. And the justification would be improving the quality and assurances of releases being deployed into production to have fewer incidents ongoing, because we've improved our testing practices and we've fed this information back to release. Okay, so something to consider. We could take this approach instead of the more traditional incident approach. Even within change, right? This is related to incidents because, sorry, it's related to releases, because every release will only get its components deployed once it gets approved through the change process. So maybe we don't have any release practices that we can hang our hat on. We don't have a real formed QA and testing practice. But maybe we do have change, because change is one of the common processes out there. So in this case, same concept. Let's tie our problem case and practices to change management. So when a change goes out, and eventually we come back and we say, hey, one of these changes failed and produced an incident, so we have to investigate that incident. Whenever you use the word investigate, here's an opportunity to say, well, we should have an independent and defined process to do that investigation. So problem management will do the research and the problem-solving skills to say what happened with this failure. And typically when you tie things into change, you get a bit more of a holistic view, because you're going to look at not just what failed technically, but also who failed. So here's the issues where we may have some procedures that are deficient, not just simply the technical issues up here. And a similar justification down at the bottom. So it's not just about releases that have come out and produced bugs, but also this would affect our procedures and our overall processes around change to make sure we're properly scoping and making sure our tests are done. Okay, so one more on my list here to talk about. Another approach. Again, maybe none of those other approaches you could build a good business case for. Maybe you don't have all the pieces in place. Here's another option where we can take the service complaints improvement approach. So this ties into the concepts and the process of service level management. Um, Even if you don't have formal service level management, somewhere in the organization, people typically will complain about a service when they don't like what they're getting. And when you're complaining about a service because you don't like what you're getting, something must have failed. Again, this in a roundabout way ties back to incidents. There must be incidents happening on this service, or there must be other things failing. And we need to investigate what's going wrong. So again, we're back to the problem-solving skills. We need a process in a defined area to say, well, let's keep track of all these investigations going on. Let's become good at what we're doing. I can justify a business case for problem management to say, we'll investigate these types of complaints on behalf of service level management if you have that process, or whoever's managing these complaints, we can take a look at the investigation. So when you start investigating a service, you look at all the components and procedures that are part of that investigation. Pretty similar to the change concept I was talking about. So it's not just technical, it's also process and procedures. I'll be looking throughout the organization to say if there's complaints on a service, what are the technical things that might not be going well, and what are some of the process and procedure things that might not be going well. And again, this makes our problem management process something a bit more holistic, where we're looking across the organization because services make use of things across the organization. So here's where you might be able to justify problem management by looking at a customer satisfaction approach. People will be happy that at the very least you're investigating things that they're complaining about, and this will increase our customer satisfaction. Okay. So something to think about, right? I'm just throwing out there something beyond the typical things you'll hear about problem management. These are other approaches that you might find a way of improving other areas to build a case for problem management. So I think I'll make this my last slide here. So within the overall improvement concept, at least when it comes to problem management, you want to get good before you get fast. The key thing about problem management is that you're coming up with solutions, and we want to make sure these solutions aren't patchwork that you have to find another solution after that. So some of the key things that tell us that we're on track with whichever approach we've taken, or that we're doing a good job in problem management. So overall, how many problems are we investigating? And of that, how many have we resolved? And how many are good resolutions? So how many times have we had to go back and solve the same problem because we didn't dig deep enough? So again, this is where problem management, to really go back to management and say, we need problem management, and having problem management is doing well. You need to show that we're actually getting rid of problems that are out there and coming up with resolutions, and we're doing a good job of it. Right? So that's one of our key things to keep the momentum going with problem management. And so I just got 3 quick bullet points down here. So what you typically, as a skill set, need to be good at within problem management: cross-functional teams and project management, because you have to assign work to the people who have the skills to do the investigation. All processes have to do this, but prioritizing problem issues. You're going to have a lot on your plate. You need to do the most important things first, and you need a good method to come up with that prioritization. And to do a good job to make sure that, it links back up here. How do we make sure that we do find the actual root cause of problems, and we don't have to go and solve them a second time because we got it wrong the first? So you want to be able to promote good problem-solving practices throughout the organization, and having a problem-solving process will help me. It's a process that I can rally around to say, here's the single source where we'll try and promote good investigation techniques.
Hey, Graham, just a quick question on that. So I think in what you're talking about here, obviously, there's a lot of time and money spent on education around problem management and process. A lot of it's related to, obviously, ITIL best practices and so on. But are you talking about something, I'm assuming you're talking about some sort of skills management, skills development beyond that, and I think, because I know you've done a lot of work in this area, just talk to that in terms of what you've identified as typically still the biggest skills gap to actually executing effectively the process, because without the skills, sometimes the process isn't working.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it relates to a bit of work I'm currently doing. But within the problem-solving process itself, again, problem management needs to manage problems. And, it's all about quality investigation and so on. On that note, problem management is also about how do we make sure that, again, it goes back to my key performance indicator right here. How do we make sure that when we're doing investigations, we're doing it right, where the organization and the infrastructure is getting better? This is what you need to do to keep problem management justified by its funding. You need to say that we're good at what we're doing and that we're actually making the organization better and getting rid of bugs. So, one of the things I've done around problem-solving practices, it's not the scope of this presentation, but there's several different techniques out there. The common things that people have heard of, being creative and more holistic in your thinking using the Ishikawa diagram, right? It's a technique that problem management can promote. Digging deeper with the 5 whys technique to make sure we're getting to more of the root cause. These are things that if you have a problem management process, you want to be able to promote an awareness of these sort of techniques to make sure that people aren't investigating with the tunnel vision and finding what they want to find. They're looking a bit more broad scale, and they're trying to improve not just technology but the organization. So, so around this, actually, one of the things I've been working with one of our clients. It's done in a workshop format. We have a nice short little 2-hour workshop for the problem management process, and it's all for the purpose of sending all of the technicians through. Instead of being a full-blown day-long problem-solving course, it's just a quick 2-hour problem-solving workshop to give everyone an overview, to give them that message that you need to be good at problem solving for the problem process because we don't want to do this twice. So it helps them think broader scale, more holistic, helps them dig deeper to not just improve and fix technical bugs, but also look at the organization to say, well, let's also fix any process and procedure issues that may have caused these technical bugs. So there's a lot of value in that. It's actually one of the things, too, another offshoot to that project. We're developing an e-learning course around this because, again, that's a way of, for another client, that we're able to have a more cost-effective way of providing this big, broad message about how to be better at becoming good problem solvers. So, so once you've made the case to establish problem management, that's why I say you want to get good before you get fast. And around this whole concept of let's make sure we do properly solve and resolve issues, we want to promote those good problem-solving practices. So that's just one of the techniques, or a couple of the techniques, which I've been using to good effect.
And Graham, there's a question that's posted here, and I don't have actually the individual who posted it. I think it might be just a point that was being made, and I'll contribute it in terms of how this is being written here. It says, after every major incident, we ask 3 questions. Do we know what caused it? No means problem investigation. Can we prevent it? No means problem investigation. Can we detect it before users see the impact? No means problem investigation. I mean, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to comment on that, because it looks like it was more of a comment from somebody that was in the group.
Yeah, no, actually, no, those are great concepts. That's part of the prioritization and work intake part of the process. And every company is a little bit different. What I heard there makes a lot of sense. Right? It's a very good thing to help say here's something that needs to go into a problem management investigation. And again, I would say that that's something I'll keep in my head because that's a nice way of putting it.
Okay. Okay, great. And so if there's any other questions, please post them over the next couple of minutes. And just wanted to kind of wrap up. So, Graham, I'm not sure if there's a final slide there that has any additional information on it for folks. But again, I wanted to just let people know as we're approaching the 40-minute mark here that we'll just be wrapping up. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully, I know again we've got a fairly large turnout here. I know, Graham, I think there's a contact slide there. If anybody has any further follow-up questions that they want in terms of specifics around what Graham has talked about here, a couple things. One is this slide presentation with audio will be made available within ThoughtRock within the next 24 hours, so you can log in and replay that at any time you want. And additionally, if there's additional questions you wanted to ask Graham about problem, because again, we just continue to see that problem process and problem skills development and that sort of thing continue to be fairly large requests for the ThoughtRock community in terms of presentations. So if you want to get any more information, you can email at info@thoughtrock.net. We'll make sure that any questions that you have specifically for Graham go directly to Graham. In addition, if there's any more information you wanted specifically on some of that work that Graham had talked about in terms of just the problem workshops and problem-solving skills and so on, some really good background there in terms of what's happening, and you can always contact Graham directly and he can kind of walk you through some of the work that's being done there. So again, I appreciate everyone for sticking around. Graham, again, great job, and again, as usual, done from an educational perspective, which I think is important for the ThoughtRock community.